People use drugs, including alcohol, for basically three reasons. Um, People have been getting high and using drugs for thousands of years. As long as we've had recorded history, really, there's evidence of people drinking alcohol, smoking, or using marijuana products, other drugs. And if people want to give up drugs, if they want to get into recovery and get complete freedom, they need to understand why people use drugs, why they were using drugs, so that they can then find ways of dealing with those things without getting high, without using drugs. The first reason is getting high, where the dopamine effect, the buzz, you know, it's such a great feeling. It's caused by dopamine going off in the reward system, the pleasure center in the middle of the brain. And I loved it when I first got drunk with a friend of mine when we were about 15 years old. And I thought, this is it, man. I'm doing this again. It's such a great feeling. You know, it's the same dopamine what we get from food and sex. And that's probably the number one reason why people use drugs. They love getting high. The second reason is to cover up negative emotions. You know, we have emotions, we have feelings that often don't feel good. You know, we feel anxious, we feel scared, we feel angry, we feel afraid, uh, we feel lonely, jealous, all sorts of things. And mood altering drugs alter our moods. So all addictive drugs make us feel better in the short term. And probably that's certainly a huge reason why most people use drugs and alcohol. Uh, in social situations, we often feel lonely or we don't feel quite as good as other people. So having a drink and using other drugs makes us feel better, and we can feel like we're the life of the party, and it feels pretty good. The third reason is a spiritual reason. Drugs give us a kind of a magical feeling, like, wow, this is exciting. Something cool could happen. It alters our reality, distorts our reality, so people can seem a little funnier. I can feel a little funny. I can feel, special. Cool things might happen. It's a little bit like Alice in Wonderland stuff. We like to get out of our humdrum kind of life, and drugs and alcohol give us a temporary feeling of that. There's no coincidence that alcohol is called spirits. Of course, some drugs like ayahuasca and LSD and psilocybin and mescaline, they do this to a large extent, but all drugs do that. So I remember the first time I got really high with smoking pot. I was like in this wonderland. There were things weren't quite real, and it was like so exciting to think what might happen, and it was so cool. So if we want to get clean and sober, if we want to, get into recovery, we need to find ways of dealing with all of those things, meeting those needs without getting high, without using drugs. The good news is, as far as the dopamine effect, there's so many ways to get good endorphin buzzes and good feelings without using drugs to do it. Sports and activities and new learning and being out in nature all do that. Being around friends, learning new activities, hobbies, listening to music, they all give us dopamine, but without the side effects that the drugs come with. Learning how to deal with our emotions is a huge part of what recovery needs to be, because if we don't deal with our stress and with emotions, and then we're very at risk of going back to using drugs, because they do give us that short-term fix that doesn't really fix anything, but it feels good in the short term. And as far as spiritual things go, spirituality is everywhere. There's a whole chapter in the book on how spirituality works. And what you realize is that spirituality is everywhere. Being out in nature, we get a sense of awe and majesty when we see big trees, or we see the sunset, or uh, when we listen to music often, when we watch movies sometimes, when we hold a baby, when we hang out with friends, when we learn new activities, new hobbies, new things, when we volunteer and do things with other people, we get spiritual experiences of love and hope and uh, acceptance and other things that we know are true. So they're all available to us, in recovery. And of course, as I just said, they don't come with all the side effects that the drugs do it, and they're real. The drugs only gave us a little window into that experience that wasn't real. It was just drug induced. So it's much better to get the real thing.